Kenyan youth will tell you sincerely, passionately, with a TikTok and a thread to back it up, that they are the most woke generation this country has ever produced. They marched in June. They trended worldwide. They said we are not our parents. They said we do not even do tribalism. They also said, and I want you to remember this, they said it's us against the system. Beautiful. Genuinely beautiful. And then August 2022 happened. Look at that map. Look at it. It's not a map of policy preference. That is not a map of economic ideology. That is a map of surnames. So here is a question, and I need you to sit with it before you even get defensive. Are Kenyan youth actually different from their parents? Or are they just their parents with better Wi-Fi? Welcome back to the Kenyan Week That Was. I'm your host, DY. Let's start with the evidence for the optimists. Because there's evidence, and I'm not going to be unfair here. Kenyan Gen Zs and late millennials have done something genuinely unprecedented. The June 2024 protest, the Reject Finance Bill, were not organized along ethnic lines. Young people from Kisumu, Eldoret, Nairobi, Mombasa, Nakuru, standing together, facing tear gas together, bleeding together. That is not nothing. And do not let anyone in this bloody country or in this world as a whole tell you that it is nothing. Online, the discourse has shifted. You see it. The language of my community has been replaced, at least publicly, by the language of my generation. Urban identity is ascendant. A 23-year-old in Nairobi has more in common, culturally at least, with a 23-year-old in Mombasa than a 60-year-old in their own village. The music is shared. The slang is shared. The suffering, boy, oh boy, the suffering is very much shared. So, yes, something has changed. Something real, truly real has changed. Now, though, let me show you what hasn't. You see, in 2017, voting blocks aligned almost perfectly with ethnic geography. Mount Kenya for Kenyatta, Nyanza for Odinga, Rift Valley heavily for deputy president's ticket. Western split, but always leaning towards Odinga. And in 2022, a new election happened. New candidates, new energy, new generation of voters. But sadly, same map. And I mean same map. The colors changed, but the alignments didn't. Ruto won with the mountain and parts of Rift Valley. Raila swept Nyanza, Western Coast. The ethnic arithmetic was so precise that political scientists, actual academics, could predict county-level results within single-digit margins using only ethnic population data and nothing else. No policy positions, no manifesto analysis, just demographics. Now. In fairness, young people will push back on this. They'll say, DY, we vote strategically. We are not being tribal. We are being practical. If our guy wins, our region always gets resources. And I want to take that argument seriously because it's not stupid. Patronage politics in Kenya is real. Ethnic regions do get punished when their guy actually loses. That incentive and that incentive structure is not a dream. It is something that we live every day in this country. But here's my problem with that argument. When everyone votes their tribe for strategic reasons, the strategy is tribalism. You've just given it, a better PowerPoint presentation. We don't do tribalism anymore. We just strategically align with our people because in the essence, that's the bedrock of that argument. And let's even think about it a little funny. If we were in a street corner and we held a camera, and asked random Kenyans on the street about how the last election went, I am pretty much sure this is what would happen. So, walk with me. The interviewer goes, do you consider yourself tribal? Respondent number one, who is 25, who lives in Nairobi, a bit horrified. Me? No, God, no. I'm a Pan-Africanist. I read Ngugi for heaven's sake. I listen to Saudi Soul. I'm very much beyond tribe. So, the interviewer pushes back. Who did you vote for in 2022 then? Immediate, without any hesitation, the respondent goes like, Raila, of course. And the interviewer asks, why, perhaps? Come on. He's experienced. He's a liberator. He's a guy who fought for and championed for our democracy. And where are you from, perhaps? And with an even longer pause, I bet he'd go like, I don't think that's relevant. Or think of another guy, 28 from Central Province. Tribalism is the tool of the political elite. I don't subscribe to it. My friends are from everywhere. Because their proximity to Nairobi, of course. And the interviewer pushes back and goes like, 22 vote? And he goes like, yeah, Ruto. But that was purely economic. We were moving with the hustler nation, which was a class thing and not an ethnic movement. And the interviewer pushes a little hard and goes like, and your home county, what were the percentages for Ruto? I guess that's where it gets awkward, because I bet the respondent will be like, don't you think the weather tonight or the weather today is really nice or beautiful? And I want to be clear, both of those people are right that they are not consciously tribal. They genuinely believe what they are saying. And that is what makes this so complicated and absolutely dangerous. If tribalism among Kenyan youth is not innate, and I'm arguing it isn't, then it must be installed. And because I believe it is installed, let's trace the installation. Before colonialism, ethnic identity in what is now Kenya was fluid. Communities traded, intermarried, raided each other, yes, but also absorbed each other. You see, think of the Maasai pastoralists and Kikuyu farmers. They had a complex interdependency. Or the coast Swahili, their identity was already a blend. Arab, Bantu, Persian, a bit of everything. And then the British arrived and needed one thing: administrative efficiency. You cannot govern millions of people as individuals. So they categorized. They drew lines, not around natural communities, but around manageable units. They created native reserves, geographic ethnic enclaves that locked communities into economic dependence on their own land while denying them access to the highlands and to commerce. The Kikuyu, for instance, were near Nairobi and the White Highlands, and the Luo were in Nyanza. The Kalenjin communities controlled the Rift Valley. And then, critically, they administered through ethnic intermediaries. Chiefs, headmen, men whose authority came not from their community's traditional respect, but from British appointment. And those men owed their power to keeping their ethnic groups legible and separate. They didn't invent ethnicity, the Brits, but they weaponized it. They turned fluid cultural identity into a fixed administrative category. And then they built the entire colonial economy around these categories. You weren't just Kikuyu because your grandfather was Kikuyu now. You were Kikuyu because the register actually said so. And the register also determined where you could live, where you could work, and whether you could send your children to goddamn schools. Here's the thing about independence that nobody puts on the commemorative plate. Kenya inherited a state. Let me just say that again. Kenya inherited a state. We didn't create our own country. We are not like the Danes or the Slovaks. We were given a state, a colonial state with colonial institutions, colonial land distribution, colonial economic geography, and colonial administrative logic. And the men who took over that state, some who were brilliant, some of them quickly discovered that the state machine worked properly. That ethnic patronage actually worked, but not for everyone, but as a system of control. So, if you think about Jomo Kenyatta's Kenya, It was, and let's be honest, a Kikuyu dominant state. Not because Kenyatta was sitting in State House going Adoamoshie kana Adoamoba. It was more subtle than that. Cabinet appointments skewed central. Parastatals and civil service skewed central. The land redistribution from departing white settlers, the 1 million acre scheme, all of it skewed more heavily towards central. Then came Daniel Arap Moi, who took over in 1978. And to his credit, he understood the assignment perfectly. He simply redirected the patronage machine from the central end towards the Rift Valley and Kalenjin speaking communities. He called it or coined it Nyayo, or footsteps, because he was following Kenyatta's footsteps to the T, but in a different pair of shoes. And what this created over the 30 years was a felt economic reality that your ethnic group's prosperity was tied to who occupied State House, not to policy, not institutions, a face and or a surname. And that feeling, that calculus was absolutely 100% correct. It was empirically accurate because resources did follow ethnicity, which means people who taught their children to vote ethnically were not being irrational. They were just following what was going to give their children the best outcomes in life. They were being rational inside an irrational system. And that system is now what you and I, first as a millennial and as young people, have inherited. And perhaps even the Gen Z to a tinge have inherited. The introduction, or better put, the reintroduction of multi-party politics in 1991 should have been a moment of liberation. More parties, more competition, more accountability. But instead, watch what happened. Without a single party structure to maintain discipline, politicians immediately began organizing themselves ethnically because ethnicity was the most efficient mobilization tool available. So you don't need to explain policies if you can trigger identity. You don't need to explain policy when you can trigger identity. I want us to sit with that for a moment because that pretty much defines the conundrum that we find ourselves in. Because you see, our politicians, the level of politicians that we have, there's no policy that they sell. There's nothing that they follow within their manifesto. They will produce a manifesto, but their target audience or what they're trying to target, like freaking, is our identity trigger. It's where are you from? What does this language, or who does this language best resonate with? And it's not about, are you educated? It's not about this classism. No, they're looking at your tribal identity. And to reinforce what I'm trying to say, the Rift Valley clashes of 92 and 97, where communities that had lived side by side for decades suddenly burned each other's homes, did not emerge from ancient hatred. They emerged from political orders, from politicians who calculated that a terrorized Luo or Kikuyu family fleeing their farm was a vote removed from the opposition. This is important. The violence was organized. There were meetings, there were payments, there were lists. And the 2007-2008 post-election violence, 1,300 people died. 600,000 were displaced. And this was the logical endpoint of that decades-long escalation. I want to say something quite uncomfortable here. The youth who participated in that violence, the guys who burned houses in Eldoret, who set up roadblocks in Naivasha, who hunted people by surnames, those were someone's children. They were young. Many were in their 20s. They were not born killers. They were produced by a political economy that told them their survival was ethnic and then created a crisis that made it feel true. So, I want you to think about the next statement I'm about to make because it's going to pretty much redefine how we look at tribalism. Tribalism is not taught in schools. It's absorbed at dinner tables. I repeat, tribalism is not taught in schools. It is absorbed at our dinner tables. Let me describe a very ordinary Kenyan evening. A family is watching the news, NTV. There's a political story. A minister from a different community has said something so controversial. The father, who has worked hard, who loves his family, and who is not even a bad person, says something. Maybe it's a joke. Maybe it's a proverb. Or maybe it's just quiet those people. Nobody writes it down. Nobody flags it. The 8-year-old at the table doesn't even register it consciously, but they file it. Over 10 years, that child files 1,000 of those moments. Not lessons. I'm talking about moments. And by the time they are 18, they have fully formed a map of the social world. Who is trustworthy? Who is suspicious? Which regions are developed and which are backward? Which communities are cunning and which ones are violent? And the 8-year-old, that little 8-year-old that was at the table didn't learn tribalism. They breathed it, like smoke from their kitchen homes without any of their consent. And to ring fence whatever I'm saying, I want you to think about the stereotypes, because the stereotypes are everywhere. Kikuyus are cunning business people who can't be trusted in politics. Luos are proud, educated, but perpetually required to be in the opposition. Kalenjins are warriors, and depending on your perspective, a threat. And don't even get me started on the Luyas, because they are warm and reliable, but politically irrelevant. What about the Costarians? Costarians are just lazy and perpetually exploited. And we'll not even get to the Somali and all these other guys. Every single one of these is a colonial era administrative generalization that got laundered through 60 years of political repetition until it felt like folk wisdom. Until it felt like folk wisdom. And your parents believed them. And their parents also believed them. And being honest, if we were to be honest for a second, you've thought at least one of those stereotype thoughts recently. I would even put a bet in the last few hours or 24 hours. One of those things has come across your mind. Because when you meet a Woji, all of us are predisposed to think, these guys must be Luya. If you meet a cop, 80%, and that is why even our comedy, when we think of comedic views of police, all of them switch to Kaleo. We've believed in these stereotypes without knowing, because intrinsically we don't consider ourselves tribal, but we have a tribal bug that continuously grows within us and exposes itself whenever it deems necessary. Before we get to the youth question, I need to stop here, because we keep talking about Kenyan youth as if they are one thing. And let's now be honest, because they are absolutely not. They are broadly I speak, two Kenyas operating simultaneously, and they have fundamentally different relationships with tribal identity, political discourse, and what an election even means. I want to be precise here, because this is where most of the analysis gets lazy. Nearly 3/4 of Kenyans still live in the rural or peri-urban areas. But when you open Kenyan political Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, or watch a panel discussion or see protest footage go viral, you almost exclusively are seeing urban Kenya. And urban Kenya has convinced itself very sincerely that it speaks for all of it. But it doesn't. The urban youth or the urban young Kenyan, and I'm describing a profile, not a caricature, has grown up in an ethnically mixed environment. Their school had kids from everywhere. Their workplace has people from everywhere. Their friends group, their relationships, their banter ethnically promiscuous in the best possible way. They consume politics through social media podcasts, YouTube. They have been exposed, perhaps more than any other previous generation, to the argument against tribalism. They can articulate why ethnic voting is self-defeating. Many of them genuinely feel the argument in their bones. We saw how they organized the June 2024 protest. They trend the accountability hashtag. They are, and I mean this with the best of my belief, the most politically literate cohort Kenya has ever produced in terms of systemic critique. And yet, even within Nairobi, the most cosmopolitan city in East Africa, 2022 voting patterns showed ethnic clustering. Constituencies with large Kikuyu populations went Ruto. Constituencies with large Luo populations went Raila. Constituencies that are genuinely mixed, the Langatas, Westlands, showed the most competitive results. The urban youth have updated the language, but the address book, who they actually trust when stakes are high, hasn't changed as much as the language wants to suggest. And there's something else, something more uncomfortable. The urban youth, the you guy, my guy, the me, the you who's listening to this very podcast, the urban youth political discourse, Twitter threads, YouTube comments, WhatsApp group arguments, dominates national conversation. It sets the terms of what counts as woke and what counts as backwards. It decides what is acceptable to say publicly, which means it has the power to shame rural youth into silence, without ever actually engaging with the real or the reality rural youth are living. And this is where, before I even proceed, I want to explain why I'm doing this episode. Because as one of the people who are proponents of the NIKO Kadi campaign, I have come to a sad realization where, yes, it's a brilliant idea. It's a brilliant methodology. But until the moment this methodology is one that has been ascribed to by the rural youth, until the moment this ideology stops looking and feeling like an urban movement, then it's an activity in futility. Because that is where the power really lies. Because the rural youth, tribe is not performance, it's infrastructure. Now, the rural youth Kenyan, I want to break him down. I want to break down the rural Kenyan youth. Because this person, and again, a profile, not a caricature, has grown up in an environment where ethnic identity is not a relic. It is infrastructure. In a rural county, the chama that lent your mother money to buy a cow is ethnically constituted. The harambe that built the local school was organized along community lines. The land your family farms and the disputes over that land are inseparable from ethnic history. The local administrator, the MCA, the MP, these are not abstract political figures. They are people whose phone numbers your parents might have. People whose favors has tangible consequence for whether your family gets a water connection or bursary. In that context, voting for your person is not backwardness. It is the most rational response to a system where the formal state has never reliably served you. And the only distribution network that has actually worked is the ethnic system. This is a thing that the urban political discourse almost never reckons with honestly. When a Kapsabet youth votes for the Kalenjin candidate and a Kisii youth votes for a Kisii candidate, they are both called tribal by a Nairobi commentator. The commentator is not wrong about that pattern, but they are dangerously wrong about the logic. Calling rural tribal voting ignorance while ignoring the material conditions that make it rational is not political literacy. It is a class contempt in progressive clothing. Urban youth changed the language. Rural youth are still living in the original problem. And until we are able to deal with that, until our movements, until our campaign programs are ready to deal with that part, then whatever we are trying to do, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, will not work. And I'm ready to be corrected. I stand ready to be corrected until the moment the NIKO Kadi movement stops being a peri-urban. You know the Thikas, the Kasaranis, until we get to Matu, Ukondani, or we are in somewhere in Nyaribari Chache, where we are able to resonate properly. That this message that we carry, that is so important, that it is life and death, that we want, that the change that we deem so important, until it resonates with that guy back in the rural end, then unapigia mbuzi guitar. It's the saddest thing, but it's the most important realization if you're going to catch anything. And that is why I want to emphasize on this, because it is time we either coalesce together and become one unit. Because if we are going to win, if we are truly, truly Kadi, then it has to be something, a movement that is able and ready to catch fire. Not just in the urban and the peri-urban areas. It has to be a movement that will move all the way to the dingiest or to the most remote areas of this country. And it has to be something that youth, regardless of status, urban area, rural area, will be able to walk and work with to the very end. Because here is where it gets politically consequential. Because these two youth populations, the urban and the rural, are not just culturally different. They are pulling the national political conversation in opposite direction. And the tension between them is increasingly being exploited by the political class. And I want to, draw up a proper example, because there was a debate that was held last year by BBC in Nairobi. And their level of contempt that the Kisii member of parliament, one of the Kisii member of parliament, Mr. Osoro, held those conversations with, was visible for all to see. Because the one thing he knew, his voters, the people that ascribe to his belief, they're not watching any of that. They don't even give two hoots about it. For them, he'll zoom into Kisii one day, into his constituency, throw in a couple of hundreds, some 200 bob there, 1,000 bob there, and guess what? He'll come back as member of parliament. This tension that we have, this difference in ideology between the rural youth and the urban youth, is what the political class is actually exploiting. Let's look at some of the fault lines. Fault line number one: who controls the narrative? You see, urban youth, by virtue of internet access, higher education, and media proximity, dominate discourse. They frame what is progressive, what is tribal, what is worth discussing. Rural youth, on the other hand, by sheer numbers, dominate electoral outcomes. You guys can kill it on Twitter. All of you urban chaps, go ahead, kill it on Twitter. And the reason why you will not evoke fear in the political class, because you don't have numbers. Because truth be told, there are more rural youth than there ever will be urban or peri-urban youth. So they have the magic number. And if you have the magic number, guess what? You take home the prize. So until the day we are able to convince them to join the cause, the political class will look at us the way they looked at Peter Kenneth when he ran for presidency. Because these two things are almost entirely disconnected. The protest generation trended worldwide. They were on BBC, the Al Jazeera, CNN. They were celebrated internationally as new African political awakening. And then the election happened. And the guy who understood rural ethnic arithmetic, the guy who had spent years building county-level structures through ethnic brokers, guess what? They won. And they will always win. Think of 2017. Think of 2022. Think back to 2013. Think back to 2007. All these election cycles, guess who dominates? There's a lot of chatter. There's a lot of woke conversations. We're getting better. We're getting more liberal. But guess the people that carry the day? The guys who understand that these elections are won by the ethnic lines. And until we are able to break it, because the rural end needs to be able to be the ones championing this NIKO Kadi, like I've said, guys, we can as well crown him president a second time. In other words, the Twitter constituency and the voting constituency are not the same constituency. And politicians know this better than political commentators actually do. So let's discuss fault line number 2, what good politics actually means. To the urban youth, good politics looks like class consciousness, cross-ethnic solidarity, accountability hashtag, policy-based voting, civic tech, data-driven governance, advocacy. To the rural youth, good politics looks like, did my road get tarmacked? Did the bursary fund come through? Is the hospital staffed? Is the water actually running in my faucet? Neither of these is wrong. But when urban political culture sets the terms of what is sophisticated and what is primitive, it actively dismisses the very material concern that drive rural political behavior. And when rural communities feel dismissed, and they do feel dismissed, guess what happens? They retreat further into their ethnic cocoons, into their ethnic coalitions that have historically delivered, however imperfectly, however corruptly. So, urban youth, I need you to hear this. Because I'm talking to, the Joe Mushiris of this world. I'm talking to the Njugushes of this world, to the Abel Mutuas of this world, to the Mwafrika of Ikoneni of this world. I need you to hear this. Your political sophistication, if it cannot speak to a Tharakanithi mother who needs a bursary for her child, it's not sophistication. It is privilege dressed as enlightenment. Fault line number 3. Who gets manipulated and how? Politicians are very good at reading this fault line. Very, very good. To the urban youth, they speak the language of reform, accountability, a new Kenya, digital governance. They show up at tech hubs and give TED Talk adjacent speeches about transformation. To the rural youth, they speak the language of community, our people, development, protection. Don't let them take what is ours. And the extraordinary thing, the thing that should alarm everyone, is that in 2022, one candidate did both simultaneously. Urban-facing messaging about, the classism, the hustler as a class concept. Rural-facing mobilization through deeply ethnic county structures. Oof. Think about it. Why do you think WSR is not scared? He is trying to co-opt. And guess what? NIKO Kadi doesn't hurt him if the numbers we are generating are not rivaling the numbers he has ethnically in the centers, then guess what? He's not going to be afraid. Because he knows at the center of everything, he might have lost the hustler guys, the people who understood, classism and whatever narrative he sold in 2022. But the people that supported him ethnically, guess what? They're still by his side. And so long as they're still by his side, then we've not moved an inch. And I'm not trying to be the devil's advocate here. I'm trying to create an awakening where we'll be able to generate enough energy to go down to the mashinani, to be able to change the thought patterns of our rural brothers, because they hold the card to the next presidency. Because you see, if I was honest, the seam between those two strategies was never publicly acknowledged. Between the hustler and the ethnicity, it was never publicly acknowledged. And the urban youth who supported the class-based narrative and the rural youth who supported or responded to the ethnic network were both, in a sense, correct about what they were going to vote for. And guess what? Both of them were being played. That exchange is not a joke. That is real tension. And the reason it matters is this: because any political movement, any reform project, any anti tribal coalition that cannot hold both of those people without being condescending to one of them will always fail. Every time. The protest won the argument, the election won the country. Again, I repeat, protests win arguments, elections win countries. And until urban political culture reckons with the material conditions that make rural tribal voting rational, rather than simply shaming it as ignorance, the fault line will keep being exploited by people who understand it perfectly. So, where does that leave the youth? Both sets of youth, at least. Let me give you the most charitable reading possible, and I mean it, charitable. Language has genuinely changed. Young Kenyans, especially urban ones, are less likely to use explicitly ethnic slurs in public. Social media creates cross-ethnic friendships, relationships, and solidarity that previous generations literally could not have thought of. The protest movements of recent years have also shown that cross-ethnic organizing is possible. These are real changes, meaningful changes actually, software updates if you even think about it deeply. But here's what or where I push back on my own charity. Software updates don't fix the operating system. And the operating system, the deep logic that says in a crisis your community comes first, is still running. In the city, it runs quietly. In the countryside, it runs loudly, visibly, and for documented material reasons. And this is where I keep, I was discussing with my producer, and one of the things that we were trying to get to is think of an incident or an example. You go into a voting booth, and one of the most inconspicuous positions is the MCA, and you do not find an MCA that you recognize, but you find the four big tribes, Kaleo, Aluya, and Kikuyu, and some other tribe, or Kisi, somewhere. But you are in Kaleo land. Guess who will be voted in as MCA? The Kaleo chap. If you move that scenario to any end of this country, same issues. You don't know the MCAs, you can't recognize any of them, but you're in a Kikuyu end, you're in a coastal end. Guess who wins? The people that share a surname with you. Because intrinsically, the operating system hasn't changed. Economic anxiety is a tribalism accelerator everywhere, anywhere in the world, for both groups, but in different directions. For the urban youth, economic anxiety produces class consciousness, the language of a hustler versus dynasty, system versus people, reform versus capture. It sounds post-tribal, it feels post-tribal, but watch who the people are when the coalition gets tested. For the rural youth, economic anxiety produces ethnic consolidation because the evidence in front of them, lived, local, granular, says that the ethnic network is the only distribution system that has actually worked. Even if it was imperfect, even if it was corrupt, it still worked. Watch the language evolution. In 1990s, vote for your own. In 2002, time for change, coded as time for the coalition against the big man's community. 2007, 41 against 1. Explicitly ethnic, and it nearly destroyed the country. 2013, Jubilee, unity of purpose, two dominant communities in coalition, dressed as national unity. In 2022, Hustler Nation, class language for urban audiences, ethnic arithmetic for rural cities and rural population, both simultaneously. Every 5 years, better packaging. Every 5 years, same product, but now a little more sophisticated, segmented, a different message for the Twitter constituency and the village constituency. And the beauty of it, from the politician's perspective, is that each group thinks they're getting the real message. This explains why whenever they travel, when they're in Nairobi, they're talking To us, Mbogi Genje, Boza, 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 all these things. But when they move out of Nairobi, they switch directly into vernacular. Their language to the people, as though these people can't understand Swahili. As though these people in the rural setting do not get a tinge of Swahili or English, or even that Sheng that we speak. What happens? They go to where they're going to be able to trigger and send the same message to do different groups at the same time. To the, urbanite, hey, we are, you guy, my guy, I'm coming in, we're out there. To the same message to the rural guy, but now this time around, it's shrouded in ethnicity. Both of them think they are the center of all their attention. And both of them, guess what will happen? Both of them end up losing and complaining for another 5 years. I'm not saying that this is not real. What I'm saying is you've seen the ad in two different versions, and you probably felt something watching each of them. That's the update. Segmented messaging. Urban youth gets the class consciousness version. Rural youth get the community version, and the candidate gets both sets of votes. That is what 21st century Kenyan tribalism actually looks like. I want to tell you why this matters beyond elections. Because elections are only the most visible symptoms. If the youth generation, both urban and rural, continues to operate in these separate political orbits without genuine dialogue, here's what is going to happen. First, reform movements collapse. The 2024 protests showed real potential, but when the dust settled, the conversations immediately fractured along urban-rural lines. Urban youth declared victory. Rural youth asked, but did anything change for us? The movement never developed a language that could hold both answers simultaneously. Second, the urban-rural fault line became the new tribal weapon. Politicians are already doing this, framing rural communities as backwards and tribally compromised, framing urban youth as elitist and disconnected. Both framings serve the same purpose, to prevent the coalition that would actually threaten the system. Thirdly, and this is the one that you should keep you up at night. A generation divided against itself is the easiest generation to rule. A generation that thinks it is different is the easiest to manipulate. Youth from urban areas, you have the language, you have the platform, you have the international attention, but you do not have the numbers. Not yet. At least not yet. Rural youth, you have the numbers, you have the votes, you have the structural power to determine every election. But the political class has spent 60 years making sure those numbers serve ethnic arithmetic rather than collective interest. Until those two groups find a way to speak to each other honestly, without condensation flowing one way and without resentment flowing the other, the system that produced this divide will still keep running. And it will keep producing the same map, the same familiar map. All right. The question you've been waiting for. Can this be unlearned? Yes, but not easily. Not without being honest about things that are very uncomfortable to be honest about. 1. Economic decoupling from ethnic patronage. As long as a government tender, a civil service job, or a bursary is more likely to reach you through ethnic networks than merit system or through meritocratic systems, tribal voting is rational. everywhere, urban and rural. The only way to change the vote is to change the incentive. That means institutional reform, independent public service commission, transparent tendering, functional courts, equitable devolution that actually devolves, all the boring things that don't actually trend. Secondly, urban youth must engage rural realities, not rescue them. There's a difference between solidarity and savior complex. If urban political movements cannot develop policy asks that speak directly to the water pipe, the bursary, the tarmac, the dispensary, without demanding that the rural communities adopt urban political language first, those movements will remain Twitter phenomena and nothing more. Your accountability framework means nothing to someone whose child needs school fees in January. Find a way to make it mean something to them, or admit that your politics is a hobby. Thirdly, rural youth must interrogate the ethnic bargain. And the rural youth, the ones who vote the ethnic bloc because the ethnic network has delivered, however corruptly, they need to ask one question: who gets richer from the bargain? The MCA who tarmacked half a road, the MP who schemed the bursary, the governor whose family owns supplier companies for every county tender, those people are not your community. They are using your community as a distribution network for their own selfish wealth. The road is still half built, not because the other tribe stopped it. The road is half built because the money for the other half is in an account in Dubai, controlled by your member of parliament. Fourth, conscious confrontation of inherited bias. This is personal. This is the one everyone can do without waiting for the government. It means noticing when you've made an assumption about someone based on their community. Noticing when you've dismissed a political argument because of who said this. Noticing when the algorithm has been feeding you curated version of political reality. Sitting with the discomfort of realizing that a lot of what feels like instinct is actually history wearing a costume. The problem isn't that we are tribal. The problem is that we refuse to admit we've learnt it. And now, which version of it we are performing? Because the urban version and the rural version are both tribal. They just wear different costumes. We laugh at our parents for being tribal. We post threads about how they got it absolutely wrong. We share the data about how ethnic voting has kept Kenya poor and its institutions weak. We nod sadly at all the analysts. And then ACAS comes. And the results come in. And the map, the same map from the beginning tells us something about ourselves that we would rather not hear. But here's the thing I didn't fully say at the beginning. The map doesn't just tell us we are tribal. It tells us we are divided in our tribalism. The Nairobi youth who's post-tribal on Twitter and the Kapsabet youth who's mobilizing through community networks, they are not the same problem. They are two different problems wearing the same name. And the people who run this country understand that better than we do or will ever do. They know that as long as the urban-rural divide keeps the youth constituency fighting each other about language, about sophistication, about who's more woke and who's more real, nobody's looking too hard at their accounts in Dubai. The British gave us the categories. The independence politicians give us the incentives. Our grandparents give us the stories. Our parents give us the instincts. And then we, the woke generation, the protest generation, the generation that genuinely knows better, we split into two factions, argued about who was really free from tribalism, and let the same old people continuously win. I'm not saying the fight is hopeless. I'm saying the fight is harder than a hashtag, that it is harder than a rural mobilization drive, that it is much harder than either group has been willing to actually admit. Because admitting it means talking to each other across the fault lines without contempt. Here's a question I want to leave you with. And I want to leave with and this is a question that I genuinely hold, that I really want you to ponder upon, and then actually try and find a solution inwardly before you even give any solution to anybody else in the country. Not are we tribal? That's too easy to deny. Not even where did we learn it from? That really matters. The question is who benefits from the fact that we are learning it in two completely different classrooms and refusing to ever compare notes? If we truly are the future of this great nation of Kenya, why does it always look so familiar? Why does it look familiar but in two different directions all at once? Like we say, receipts over vibes. Always. So before I go, I want to big up Ademba Allens. He's doing a phenomenal job. But I also want to leave you with a casting call. He can't do it by himself. I want you to think about something so profound. You know why it is harder for anyone to consider Maraga as a presidential candidate? It's not because he's corrupt. Neither is it because he has an intrinsic failure, that we have evidence that he's not been a good leader. It's because deep down, we still hold on to our tribal bias, regardless of whether we are urban or rural. And if Kenya is to ever change, change has to finally begin with each one of us looking inward and trying to find that little child and course correcting them and letting them know they are first Kenyans before they ever were tribal. Again, like I say, receipts over vibes always. God bless Kenya. And God bless each and every one of you who's giving it time to make the right decision and to choose the right person for this country. Barakatele, and have yourselves a lovely week, day, or evening, wherever you are. It's been me, your host, DY, and this has been the Kenyan Week That Was.